Today is March 12th, 2016. We are in Fairborn, Ohio. We are interviewing Randall Ark, who was born on June 2nd, 1948. The names of the people attending this interview are Timothy Wolf. The organization we are working with is Wright State University's Veterans Voices Project. Mr. Ark served in Vietnam. He served in the 1st Infantry Division. His highest rank was E4, and he served in Vietnam. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted in November of '67 and decided to enlist to be a medical corpsman. And so I enlisted and went in April of '68 is when I left for boot camp.
Did you have a feeling that you were going to be drafted, like knowing how things were going at the time, or was it a surprise?
Actually, I was attending Wright State right here, and my heart really wasn't in school. So I didn't do very well, and I was, I forget what they called it, but suspended for a quarter or two because of my grades. And it was during that interim that I was drafted. And I was actually glad. I needed a direction to go, and I didn't know what was going on. I was very naive about Vietnam or any of the stuff that's going on in the world. So I was glad to be going in the Army. My dad was in the Army in World War II. So I considered it was a good thing. I thought it would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And do you recall your first days of service? Like, I imagine, like getting off the bus at boot camp.
I remember flying, when we were flying down to boot camp, it was the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And most of the people on my plane were from New York. They were blacks and Puerto Ricans. And I don't remember any altercations or anything because of that, but we were all kind of shocked by it. And we got off. It was nighttime, and when we got off at the reception station, it was called, at Fort Jackson. And I don't remember anything except I remember lining up, getting clothes. You know, like I said, it was dark out. You don't know anybody. And I remember somebody telling us we were going to go on police call, and I kept thinking, oh cool, we'll get billy clubs and helmets, so we're good. But I didn't know that police call was picking up trash, so I didn't even know what a fort was supposed to be. You know, my only experience with forts was like on TV, like Fort Apache and all those things, you know. But I was pretty naive back then.
Okay. Oh, was it, like in certain ways, was it more than you expected? Like, this is bigger than I expected, or was it underwhelming, would you say, initially?
Well, I was raised on a farm, so I was used to work and hard work. But I don't remember it being overwhelming or underwhelming. I just went with the flow. That's what I remember.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yes, I do. Sergeant Barnes was my instructor. He was airborne infantry, a well-built black man. He was a nice-looking guy, but boy, he was strict. He wasn't mean, but he was a good drill sergeant, and he made us one of the top barracks or whatever. You know, his unit, us under him, we ran and ran and ran. He loved to run, so we ran everywhere, and we scored the highest in points in PT tests and all that stuff. He was a good drill sergeant. I have no bad images of him at all. So.
Did you have trouble getting through boot camp, or was it a struggle at times where you had to kind of reinforce yourself internally?
I lost a lot of weight in boot camp. I was one of my best friends in boot camp that I met there was a guy named Howard Albert, and he played with the group The Fifth Dimension. He got his draft notice playing at Caesar's Palace. So he and I kind of clicked, and we're still friends to this day. And he runs a recording studio in Florida and all this stuff. But a lot of times he wasn't used to the rigorous athletic, stuff, and I would help him along. And some, when we're going up hills, and sometimes he'd get sick, and. But I got through it okay. There were certain drills I did not like at all, like low crawl and all that stuff. But there were other parts, and it really smelled good down there. A lot of evergreens and stuff in South Carolina, and the red dirt. It was, as far as, I'm glad it wasn't winter.
Yeah.
I do not like doing stuff like that in the cold.
That's interesting. The natural smells kind of covered up, I guess, like what the human,
Yeah.
would be putting off. So that's interesting. I didn't expect to hear that. And you served in Vietnam, correct?
Yes, sir.
Where exactly did you go while you were in Vietnam?
I want to tell you another thing about the reception station. This was very unusual. Mm-hmm. We were standing outside. This was before boot camp. We spent 3 days in the reception station. And they pulled some of us out of line. They called our names out, and they said, "You men are going to skip boot camp, and you're going to go straight to helicopter machine gunner school." And I'm thinking, they must be dying like flies if they're skipping boot camp. I never heard of such a thing. And I raised my hand. And I said, "Sergeant," I said, "I enlisted to be a medic." And he says, "Okay, then you get back in line." But it kind of told me what would have maybe happened to me if I hadn't enlisted. And because helicopter machine gunners, they don't last too long over there. And so that was something that was very unusual that happened to me, to be pulled out like that.
That's fascinating. Like, I mean, I've heard of several unorthodox procedures that were used during the Vietnam War and things like that, but that's a new one. And so they would have people skip proper training this entire way just to get pushed to the front to be gunners, because I guess you only in that position would ideally
you would skip boot camp and go to what was called advanced infantry training. My medical training was called AIT, which is advanced infantry training, and I'm supposing that helicopter machine gunner school would be the site. You would be trained in that. You wouldn't go through all the rigors of boot camp. You would just do that. So.
Wow. and you effectively, probably also literally dodged a bullet, by having to be a medic, which I guess would be even more valuable to a lot of people. So
I had visions of grandeur of being a medic. I pictured myself in an air-conditioned hospital surrounded by nurses.
I can see why that would be enjoyable.
I figured, oh, this would be good. So, it didn't work out that way.
Yeah. And
you asked about Vietnam.
Yeah, the locations, like where did you go while you were in Vietnam?
We landed at Bien Hoa, and people always say this. They were firing on us as we came in. They always say that. I don't know if they were or not. But we landed there, and the one thing that I remember, and I wrote a biography about this, an autobiography, that as we're getting off, we see the guys that are getting ready to go home. And they weren't loud, they weren't cheering, they were pretty somber. And every once in a while you'd hear them, as we're walking by, they would say, "Give them hell, boys," just little things like that. They wouldn't make fun, just, it was pretty solemn. And they still had on their jungle fatigues and, the dirt and everything like that. I'm sure they were glad to be going home, but it was pretty somber. And then they let us off, and when they signed us to our divisions. I got in the 1st Infantry Division. And I kept thinking, oh man, this is, I kept thinking they're probably the first in everything. They're first to go into the jungle, the first to do this. But it wasn't like that. And then they, somewhere along the line, we went to jungle school. A week of jungle school in Vietnam where you trained with every weapon. You went on patrols. You did camouflage. You shot all the guns. And I don't even know where that was conducted. I remember me and this other guy got lost walking in a river thing, water up to here, and we saw machine gun fire going back and forth above us, you know. Red tracers this way, orange tracers or green tracers this way. And I said we shouldn't have got separated. You know, good, but we found our way back. We had leeches on us, we found out when we got back. And everybody had leeches. And you didn't feel them until you saw them, you know. But, anyway, then we got assigned to our other units, and we went out of, that was in Zion. And then they flew us up to Light K, and I got assigned to a medical battalion. And I was with those guys for a while. In a medical battalion, you do what's called med caps. And you'd go out with other medics, and you'd go to villages and stuff, and you would treat the villagers. And they'd have infantry units surrounding us to protect us while we were in that particular village treating them. And that was pretty neat, because those little kids and stuff, and the mama-sons, you know, we were given shots, we were cleaning wounds, there were a lot of open sores. And, but those little kids, some of them would just cling to you. You know, there were some that had like no clothes at all, nothing, and they would come walking out from who knows where, barefooted, not a stitch of clothes, you know, maybe looking for a piece of candy or something that the GIs would hand out, and I got some pictures of that, but I often wonder what happened to some of those kids. And it was their whole life, all they knew was war. You know, every year, you know, that was their life. And I thought about that. But as in the medical battalion, you're always anticipating the day that you would be assigned to go out in the field as a field medic into combat. And we would watch as each one of us, you know, the weeks or months would go by, and pretty soon somebody would say, hey, I just got assigned to so-and-so.
When you mentioned the tracers, you said red one way and green the other way.
Yeah.
I'm not especially familiar. Like, was the United States using red tracers, and
Yeah.
was the enemy using green tracers?
Yeah.
So you walked into a combat zone.
Yeah.
Inadvertently.
Yeah, there was a firefight going on across above our heads.
Wow.
Is it okay if I have a sip of coffee?
Yeah, absolutely. What's going to happen is the majority of this is going to go to, all of this is going to the Library of Congress.
Okay.
And then I'm going to edit this into a shorter 6-minute, I think, sort of concise interview. And so they'll be both present, but the raw cut is absolutely fine. Anything can be in there, like me talking like this or you sipping. So.
Okay.
Okay. And then something else I wanted to ask about the children that you were serving in the villages. Were they especially sick? Like, was that like a side effect of war, or was that just a natural kind of?
Well, penicillin was like a wonder drug over there, and we're talking people that lived in grass huts, still had ox carts and oxen pulling things. So when we would come in with medicine and what they needed to treat open sores, and they would get ringworm. It could be anything with these people. Now, some of the villages had prostitutes, and we would inoculate all the prostitutes, you know, the best we could with penicillin, and there was something else we gave them, I forget, but Yeah, it wasn't because the villagers had some kind of disease running through it. It was just normal everyday stuff, but for them, to be treated by us was a big deal for them. You know, they really appreciated that. I love this picture I have of a little boy. He followed me around. I bandaged up both of his knees that were open, and he he just followed me around. So I had somebody take a picture of us together, and he had his little arm on my shoulder, you know. And that was good stuff. That was the good stuff. Yeah.
That's good. So you had some, and that was initial stuff too.
Yeah.
The beginning was
yeah.
somewhat positive.
Yeah, you were out in the countryside and in the jungles, and you saw how they lived, and you know, that was good exposure. You know, as you would go by or walk by, you know, some kids would peek out from a door of a grass hut, you know, and you'd see a big turkey out in the. They had a pin for a turkey, and I got a picture of that. And they had all these, a lot of Buddhist temples and stuff. And one of the Buddhist crosses, it's a backwards swastika. Was a Buddhist cross, and they had some very elaborate graveyards that were made when the French were there, and those were kind of neat to look at. And some of the temples and the churches and stuff like that, but most of what we saw were grass huts and very crude buildings and schoolhouses where the school bell was a big kettle drum hanging up. You know, you bang the drum.
And that was your first assignment as a medic?
Yes.
Okay.
Medical battalion, yep.
In the next one, have you see combat, or was that?
Well, didn't see combat except for an occasional incoming rockets and stuff in my K where we were. But everywhere you go in Vietnam, somebody say, "Oh, you're in Rocket City." Every place was Rocket City, and Lyking was no different. And so one of our close friends that was a medic in that battalion, he got called out, and 2 weeks later he came back, and his name was Simon, and we said, "What happened?" You know, he says, "I couldn't take it. I just couldn't take it." He says, he says, "I'm getting reassigned to work in a psychology unit, or you know, a psychiatric unit. I'm going to be working there. I couldn't take it in the field." Of course, that kind of scared all of us, you know. And but my really good friend Bill Keegan, he got assigned to a 1st Cav unit, and he was gone. And then I got assigned to the 1st and 5th or something. I was only there maybe a week or two. It was still in Lake Hay, but it was on the perimeter. It was like a battalion aid station, but I didn't like these medics they were lazy. They did everything they could to get out of work, you know, and I did not like that. That wasn't me, and I let it be known that, you know, I was unhappy. And finally, one time during a rocket attack, I went into one of the hooches there and just laid in a bunk during the attack, and a captain comes in, and I didn't get up. You're supposed to jump up and salute. I didn't. And finally he yells at me. I get up, and he says, "Look, if you don't like it here, I can get you out on the front lines tomorrow." And I said, "Good, do it." And he did. And so the next day I moved in a bunker at the 8th and 6th Artillery. We had 4 8-inch cannons, and we were right on the perimeter next to the jungle there, and we got hit a lot. But I was the only medic for the whole battery, and it was in February of '69, and we got hit about 2:30 in the morning, and this buck sergeant ran up to our bunker. I was in the communications bunker. And he says, "Where's Doc?" And I said, "I'm right here, Sarge." And he says, "Come on, we've got some wounded on gun number 1." This is my first time out, actually out in it. And so I grab my medic bag and we go outside. And he has to show me where to go because I'm new there. And the only way you could see was the flashes of the explosions. That's the only light there was. And so we're kneeling down next to our bunker, and he says, "We're heading right over there." It was about 100 yards away. And we just take off running, and there's rockets and mortars coming down. And so right before we get to the bunker, there's this really bright flash in front of me, and it blinded me. And then I feel the sergeant's arm grab my shirt. He says, "Come on, Doc, this way." And he pulls me inside the first bunker, and there's wounded laying in there. Now, they had a fire mission during this attack. And daggone, these guys, during us getting hit, we have a fire mission for somebody that's 20 miles away. And they run out on these guns, then they hear explosions, they do their fire mission, and they bring more wounded in, okay? And the hardest part about me being a medic was doing field triage. Is I gotta figure out who's wounded the worst, you know, get to them first, you know. So I ask around, because I can't see very well. There's just a little light bulb running off a generator swinging up there. There's dust and dirt falling down. And just like in a war movie. and I ask, does anybody see blood spurting? Is anybody concerned about the wounds before I get to them? And nobody said anything, so I just started treating people. And we had, I think all totaled, we had like 17 hit that night between the 4 bunkers. And I don't remember a whole lot about running from bunker to bunker. I wish I could, but I don't. I remember that first bunker. And I remember kneeling down, I remember ripping a pant leg open to expose the wound, and then putting a field dressing on it and wrapping it up. And but the rest, it's just a blank. It's just, I don't know. I remember when the sun came up and the shelling was over, and I lit up a cigarette and was walking back to the communications bunker. And there was a guy walking just off in the distance, and he yells out, "Hey, Doc!" And I looked over and he goes, "You done good, Doc." And that made me feel really good. That made me feel really good. It was like tested by fire, and from that point on, those men knew that if they were wounded, I'd be there, that was the kind of doc I was, so. And that's when I found out I was wounded. I got back to the bunker, and I saw, looked like little burn holes in my fatigues from my knees to here. And I could, what the heck? And I take off my shirt, and there's little red spots like pimples that have been broken open. There's little blood dripping down from some of them. So I kept thinking, wow, I better go get this checked out. So I ran up to the field hospital, and I got it. He said, well, you got peppered with tiny pieces of shrapnel. He said it would take me forever to get them all out and very painful. If you can stand it, we'll just leave it alone, and it'll work itself out. Your body will treat it like a foreign object, and it'll move out. I said, okay. I said, I really don't feel it, And it was years later that, in fact, I was home when one of them came out of my knee, fell into the bathtub. I heard it fall, and I picked it up. It was a little piece of metal, kind of twisty. I go, wow, I don't even know what I did with it. I wish I had kept it, because I never got it written up for a Purple Heart. Never got my papers, even though I got treated. But I got my 3rd Army Commendation Medal, and this one was with a V device for Valor. And I didn't know what all that stuff was. They just sent papers home and said, your son did this. And it was a decoration for heroism, And last year, April 2015, I was inducted into the Ohio Military Hall of Fame for Valor because of that one medal. You know, that made me eligible. And they had a big ceremony up in Columbus, Ohio, and they had World War II people up there, Korean War people, guys from Afghanistan, Iraq, anybody that got a Silver Star or a medal with a V, you know, or any of that. So I was in good company, and that was kind of fun. That was kind of fun. It was a Navy SEAL that, I got pictures of all this, that put this big medal on me, you know, and that was kind of cool. That was kind of cool. But most of the rest, there's only one other thing, if you got time.
Plenty of time.
One of my best friends, David Crilly, he turned 18 in Vietnam. We called him Kid Crilly because he was only 18. We were 19, 20. He was a fun-loving kid from California, and he was writing my sister. He needed somebody to write to, so he was writing my sister. And after one of our nights of combat, I came in and I threw my .45. I didn't do it. I didn't carry a 16. I carried a .45, and I just threw it on the bunk. And I went outside and did something. And my other good friend, Jesse Fugate, comes walking out. He comes towards me. It may be 2 hours later. Comes walking out, and he's all teary-eyed. He said, "David just shot himself." I said, "What?" He says, the gun with your pistol. He shot himself with your pistol. Right there. And I go, "No way." He says, "Yeah." I said, "It had to be an accident." You know, he's always fooling around doing stuff. And he had to be maybe watching to see how a bullet came into a chamber or something. And when he brought it back up, his thumb was on the trigger, went off. Anyway, he killed himself, you know. And Jesse said we stuffed a pillow on his head. They said his head was bleeding like a faucet. And he actually lived till they got him to the base camp hospital, but he died shortly thereafter. And that was a heartbreaker. I loved that guy. And he, after the war, after I got home, I thought about that a lot. And once the internet came out with all that kind of stuff, I had put something on Facebook, not Facebook, because that hadn't started yet. It was just, I forget what it was, but there was a class reunion in California where David attended, and they were looking up stuff on the internet, and they saw something I had posted about David. And this guy, he was a Marine, he got a hold of me, and he said, "Randy," he says, "I know David's mother, and she's still living. Would you like to communicate with her?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And I think it was that evening, she called me. David's mother called me. This is, I forget when the internet first came out and was going strong, but anyway, I answered the phone, and she goes, "Oh, dear, dear Randy." And I said, "Oh my gosh." She goes, "I am so happy to be able to talk to you." And we had a nice long conversation. And that next summer, I went out to California with my wife and my daughter, and we spent the day with Eleanor Kitchen. She was David Crilly's mother, and she had like 8 children. And there were some other brothers there and a sister, and we spent the day, and they asked questions and wanted to know this and wanted to know that. So it was good closure for me and them. And that we sat down to a meal together. She treated me like a son, and still does. We still communicate often. And she said, I didn't know if somebody had it in for him. I didn't know if he was, doing drugs. I didn't know if he was suicidal. I just didn't get that from the Army. And I said, "Oh, everybody loved your son. He was a happy-go-lucky kid. He was nice. He was good to be around." And I said, I truly think it was an accident. He was always screwing around with stuff. and tripping over stuff, and he was just a funny kid. And she goes, well, tell me, what the Army gave me all these medals. What are these medals for? So I told her what they were each for. And a couple of them were given posthumously. And they dug out some old picture albums, and we just looked at stuff, and I told stories, you know, about David. And of course, my sister was very upset when she found out. And anyway, I'm so glad that I went out and spent time with the family. Now, his father, who was a Korean War veteran, he passed away. But she's 90, 91 now. She was like 86 then. And just a wonderful, wonderful lady. Still very gracious. But I just wanted to tell you about David, because he was a good friend.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad you did. I apologize if some of this sounds like I'm going back over some things you might have said. This is questions from the Library of Congress, and they want to make sure I hit them all. So.
Right, that's no problem.
That was a lot to take in. That was a interesting story, you know. And you said you believe it was unintentional,
right?
You know,
right. There was nothing in David's behavior that indicated he would ever even contemplate doing anything like that. Nothing.
Were you aware of anyone, other instances with other individuals that had committed suicide?
Not there, not then, no.
Okay, not in that area?
No.
Okay.
Now, Jesse Fugate later got yellow jaundice. He's the other guy I mentioned in that story. He was from Dayton, and he was a real good friend. He was like a brother also, and he always called himself the 50 man. I never saw him with a 50 caliber gun, but he called himself the 50 man. And but he got yellow jaundice and was sent to Japan and then sent home. And I wanted to find him a few years ago, and it took me 3 years to locate him, and I found out that he had died in 1992 and was buried in a special Fugate cemetery on top of a mountain in Hazard, Kentucky. And we went and found his grave. 3 years it took to look him up. I wished he'd still been alive. I would have asked him more questions about David Crilly, because he was there in the bunker. You know, I would have asked him. But and I was really surprised to find out that he had passed on. It was from complications of Agent Orange. And I've lost a few friends from that. I've been affected by it. Almost everybody there has, but some more than others. Mostly with cancers and diabetes and stuff like that. So.
And these two individuals that you mentioned, David and
Jesse,
they were part of the artillery crew you were assigned to.
Yeah, they were in my bunker. We were all in the same bunker.
And you said you got a medal with a V for Valor. Was that due to the first instance? Or okay, so the very first time out. Wow, really a trial by fire for sure. And when you were wounded, I take it that was from the initial flash that blinded you.
That's what I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because inside, was it like open or pretty closed off as far as the building?
Off. Yeah, it's just a small bunker.
Small bunker. Yeah. So it's made out of cement and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. Wow. And you just didn't even notice. And like, how long were you performing operations or providing triage to the individuals in there from the time that you initially were blinded and then were walking back, lighting up a cigarette?
How much time passed?
Yeah, how much time was that? Like, I know you said like many of the events kind of a blur.
the barrage of rocket and mortar fire happened about 2:30 in the morning, and I was walking back. The sun was just coming up, so we're talking 4 or 5 hours maybe. But we had been under attack, like on Mother's Day, it was like 7 hours. We were under attack. And there's nothing worse than a rocket, you know, you don't know where they're going to land. When you're in a firefight, you know where it's coming from, kinda, you know, but that stuff coming in, you know, it kind of gets to you. It gets to you afterwards. Like when it's all going on, you're busy, you're doing stuff, you're concerned about the guys, you want to make sure you don't lose a life, or this guy dies while you're working on this guy when you could have helped this guy, and you don't want that to happen. And you know, I'm 20 years old and doing all this, and it affects you later. You think about it later, and that's when you light up a smoke. Everybody lit up a smoke. You know, once the firefight's over, or you know, you're in an engagement or something, the first thing you do is just take a breath. Just the way it was. And I did not do drugs over there. Absolutely not. I don't know too many that did. Every once in a while that, you know, somebody would, I mean, the stuff was everywhere. I mean, nom grass and all that kind of stuff. But I was a medic, and I valued their lives so much that I wouldn't want somebody doped up working on me, you know, as a medic. And so I didn't pop any pills or smoke grass or any of that stuff. I used 1 kilo of grass once for a pillow out in when we were out in the boonies. I also used you know what C4 is? I had a big package of C4 that I used for a pillow one night.
Wow, explosive material? Yeah. Wow.
You just do, you know, I don't know what to say. You just do stuff, you know. And in the bunker, I love telling kids this when I speak at schools. Almost every night, rats would come out of the sandbags, and they would come down. They'd roam around on my bunk. I could feel them, and the way they would wake me is they would either nibble on my earlobe, or my fingertips, or my elbow. I don't know why they picked those places, but they only broke the skin one time on my arm right here, and I had a week left to go and gnaw, and I get a rat bite. And I'm going, oh my God, if they think I'm going to get rabies, and I have to stand on a week and get shot in the stomach. Yeah, but the doctor said that, yeah, I should have got a perp mark for that. I don't think they consider rats enemy combatants.
Oh, yeah.
But no, he just gave me a tetanus shot and said, no, rabies is not a big deal over here, so you're good to go. And but they came down every night. They would roll around, and I could feel them walking on me, and then they'd eventually get to the floor where all the good stuff was, the beanie weenies and the leftover food. And they go, Mr. Ark, you have rats crawling on you? I said, the rats were the least of my worries, believe me. Now up north, the rats were much bigger. Yeah. And they were bigger than cats up there. I'm glad we didn't have those rats. These rats were like regular rats.
Did you spend any time up north, or like
there are
stories?
We went further north to set up fire bases, and but I don't know some of the places. I remember one of them was Fook Vin, but I don't know the other places. I don't know if they had a name. You know, you just set up, you build bunkers for yourselves, do firing missions, and all our guns were on track. So then we'd head back somewhere else, or back to where we were in Lycaea, set up on the perimeter there. So I don't know how far north we got, but I don't think it was too far north. Fook Vin was the only one I remember, and that was just a little farther, maybe 30, 40 miles north of where we were. But Seems like, it takes a long time to get there and on track, but and dusty, dirty.
Can you explain a little bit about what a fire mission is?
A fire mission is like, we get, once you get your tanks, you mean how to set up or what?
Just for
Exactly
people
what a
who-
fire mission is?
Yeah, it's I don't know specifically, but what I infer is that is relocating to commence fire from
Right.
artillery,
Right.
and then it's a temporary thing, and then you come back from it. Is that right?
Yeah, our guns could fire as far as 20 or 21 miles accurately. And so we would set up in places where somebody needed support. There was a certain campaign or mission going on, and they needed our support. So we had to move in a position where we could reach them with our guns. And we would set up, they would call in coordinates for us to the gun guys, and they would load up. Now our canisters, our shells weighed 200 pounds each, and then they had these big powder bags, and the most powerful powder bags were the white powder bags. And they'd stick those in. I said, it was so cool. You would watch that shell, it looks like it was going to the sun. Just go, just like that. Oh man. And then they hear back, you got the bunker, all that kind of stuff. And that was a fire mission. Somebody would call in coordinates from wherever they were at, say we need this, or give us a, they would do like 3 shots sometimes. They would do one that was too far, one was too close, and then they knew right in the middle where to go. But an artilleryman could be much more specific than a medic. So.
Right. And you accompanied them along these missions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Was there?
I was the only medic.
Was there much combat along the way, or was it once you got set up that you?
It was usually once we got set up.
Okay.
I remember going on these dirt paths. I remember oxen crossing the road with these ox carts and stuff. We had to stop for these old oxen. We would see, I don't know what else, Vietnamese, we call them gooks, out in these sand pans going down the river fishing, I think. They're probably spies. But I don't ever remember encountering any fire, small arms fire on the way. I remember one of the places we set up, I found a scorpion in my bunk roll. It was like this big, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so I had a big Bowie knife, and I kind of scraped it out in the dirt in front of the bunker where I was staying, and I just stabbed it and pinned it to the ground. That daggone thing stayed alive for 2 hours, I bet, with that knife stuck through him. But at least I knew where he was. He wasn't in there. He wasn't going to come back. I wasn't going to pick him up and throw him. So,
I don't blame you.
So that's what I did.
Were you ever a prisoner of war?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I was just a prisoner of the Army.
How did you feel in general about the war at the time?
At the time?
At the time.
At the time, I didn't. I mean, my nose is running.
I'm sure we'll find something.
I might have. I think I have a. I hate doing this because you're running.
No, that's okay. I can stop and get you a tissue if you like.
I think I got something.
Okay.
There we go. Apologies.
No problem.
Okay, now what was the question?
Let's see. The question was, how did you feel about the war at the time?
Oh, I didn't think too much about it. At the time, my main concern was keeping people healthy. I was also doing sanitary stuff, latrines and all that, and to keep people alive if they get wounded. That was my main concern. I wasn't into the politics. There was one time that we spotted the NVA. There was a bunch of them along our tree line, and nobody was messing with them. And we're going, what the heck? Why is nobody firing on these guys? I mean, they'll probably hit us tonight. And somebody said, well, that's the politics of this war. They're going to let them go through and go wherever they're going. I said, why? That doesn't make sense. I said, it just happens sometimes. I don't understand that, you know. But I remember that happening, but that's the only thing that comes to mind that I thought politically. When Nixon got in, things changed. We now went into Cambodia and Laos, and we got things done. We bombed Haiphong Harbor. You know, Nixon was the one that got him back to the peace table, because he told him, he said, you guys leave this peace table, I'm going to bomb the hell out of you. That's the way he said it. And he did. And they finally understood what we could do if we wanted to. We never did that before. Our hands were tied. And the whole war changed. Thank God Nixon got in. He knew how to fight a war. You know, you can say what you want about Nixon, but to me, he saved a lot of lives. You know, because he knew how. He says, we're gonna end this. He started pulling people out as soon as he got in. Mm-hmm. You know, and he increased bombing. We weren't doing our full potential, but you know, years later, the more I read about Vietnam and stuff, I never lost a major battle. We nearly wiped the Viet Cong out of existence during the Tet Offensive. That was never reported. You know, it was all media. I think the media helped keep the Vietnamese going, because they kept thinking, oh, America's so, they're so against this war, all we got to do is hold in there, and they'll give us whatever we want. And the media helped promote that. And of course, most Vietnam guys will tell you how much they hate Jane Fonda for going, and for good reason. But I am not filled with hate for anybody. But it was very sad what she did. Very sad. A lot of people got hurt. But you know, if you read the military record of what happened in Vietnam, our guys did good. They did real good. And the only reason Saigon fell, you know, the Vietnamese held their own for 2 years after we left. And then Washington reneged on their promises to the Vietnamese. And they no longer supplied them, no longer gave them guns and stuff to help keep what they had going. And that's when the communists took over. You know, if we'd have kept our promise and just supplied them, they were holding their own. But politics.
Yeah. So we can lead into how you felt post the war, like, and how you can expand on that if you like. You know, how maybe your mind's changed from 5 years after to now.
Well, I didn't. I think it was in the 90s when I first heard about or suspected something with Agent Orange. When I first got type 2 diabetes, our county commissioner's wife, our county commissioner was wounded in Vietnam, was paralyzed from the waist down, and he became a county commissioner. And I was working with his wife as I was a school teacher, and she said when she found out I had type 2 diabetes, she informed me about Agent Orange, you know, and getting into the VA clinic, getting checked out. So I did that, and I never, for years, nobody said anything about Vietnam. I didn't talk to anybody. In fact, when we got home to California, when we flew home, there were protesters there, of course, and that was our greeting. And a sergeant told us, he says, when you get home, he said, I would not wear your uniform anywhere. If you're applying for a job, don't put on your resume that you were in Vietnam, or they will not hire you. there were even VFWs in Springfield that wouldn't accept Vietnam veterans. I said, oh my God, you know, is there any way to treat a veteran? Of course, I was thinking of my buddy David and people that died, you know. This is not right. This is not right. And anytime I was around any Vietnam veterans and I was aware that they were Vietnam veterans, we never talked. We didn't introduce ourselves. They didn't have that welcome home, all that stuff. And one year I was teaching, and it was an open space classroom, and a group of 4th or 5th graders came to the opening of my open space, and I had students in there and everything. And they came in, and each one of them passed by my desk and laid a card on my desk. It was on Veterans Day. And it says, "Thank you, Mr. Ark, for serving. Thank you. And we're sorry about any friends you had that died." All these little cards, one by one. These kids, little kids coming by. And I got tears in my eyes. This is the first time anybody ever said anything, a thank you or anything. And I was really moved. I was moved by that. It was one of the teachers that knew that I had been in Vietnam, and she wanted her kids to do that. And things started to change after that, you know, and I became friends with one of the teacher's husbands. His name was Rick Farmer, and he was a airborne ranger in Vietnam. He was stabbed while on patrol. An arm came around from behind a tree for his heart, but got him right here. That's how dark it was. It was so dark in those jungles you cannot imagine. And we became good friends, and we still are. And oh golly, just so many things have happened, turned around from being afraid to tell people you were in Vietnam to, you know, people coming up, and now we can wear our hats and stuff like that. And that's why I do stuff for veterans. You know, I work with veterans a lot, and just to help them out. That's what I want to do. I want to help veterans. I want to give them a direction. I've helped put up 2 monuments, working on a 3rd in Springfield, and I've kind of dedicated myself to helping veterans. But right now, I don't know if Jennifer told you about we do a weekly spot in the Springfield newspaper. It's called Hometown Heroes, and the editor of the Springfield News and Sun asked if I would help her, and I said sure. So I get these questionnaires, and I locate people, and every week we get a hometown hero. We highlight a veteran, and I tell them, I said, I don't care if you were a desk clerk or a supply sergeant or you got the Medal of Honor. You were a veteran, and you know, you deserve some notice. You know, get noticed. So.
When you were, I'm sorry about that. When you were in combat, or in the theater, I suppose would be the correct term. How did you stay in touch with your family? Like you said, I believe you said you wrote letters.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. The letters were about 11 or 13 days apart. So that means you could get a letter from your son 2 weeks after you found out that he'd been killed. You know, that's the way the mail system was. But I called home once when I went on R&R to Japan to see another fellow medic who was wounded and sent to Japan. And that's why I went there. And then I called home, and that was the first voice contact I had. And I felt bad about it because back then long distance cost money. And I'm glad we didn't have the FaceTime and all that. I couldn't be in a war and contact home every day. That doesn't, I don't know, maybe kids nowadays a big deal, but I want to concentrate on the war. If I'm in a war, I want to be in the war. I don't want to be half there and half at home, you know. I'd always wonder about, you know, there were certain times in Vietnam when you're out doing stuff, and you always wonder what's going on. Wonder if they're to drive in. My buddies are to drive in right now, you know, and stuff like that. You'd think about that. But I called home once, that was it. And otherwise it was just letters. My mom wrote every day. It didn't matter what she said, she wrote. She knew how important letters were, from her brother being in World War II and my dad being in World War II. She knew the importance of letters. And Howard Albert's mom would write me a lot and send cookies. And she's still alive, and she's in her 90s, and I always send her cards and stuff. And when I went down to Florida one time to see Howie, I went over and saw her where she was, and she knows that I always remember that she sent me cookies and stuff in Vietnam. It meant a whole lot. Even after Howie was wounded, he was the one that got wounded, I went to see.
Did you feel like you had plenty of supplies while you were in theater? I know it sounds like you had a deficit of pillows, you know.
You think did I think we were well supplied?
Yeah, did you have plenty? Like, is there anything you lacked for?
Oh, fresh water. We always had chlorinated water, or they mixed Kool-Aid with it, which I didn't like. I couldn't drink Kool-Aid for a long time when I got home. I had, medical supplies. I could always go to the base camp hospital and get medical supplies and keep stocked up. I was never in a kind of an outfit where we ran out of food and stuff like that, like other guys had, you know. So that I was very fortunate. C rations or K rations, but the K rations were from Korean War. There was right on there, Korean, you know. And I said, man, the shelf life of these things must be forever. So, but no, I can't think of anything right off. You know, we could have whatever clothes we wanted and all that, but I can't think of running short of anything.
Okay. Did you feel a lot of pressure or stress during your time serving as a medic?
I think most of the pressure and stress came before I got into combat, because I was worried about getting into combat and how I would do. I was always worried about if I would remember what to do for certain wounds. And even though when I graduated from my medical training, I got trainee of the cycle. And it was funny, we were sitting in this big auditorium, and they were having, somebody was speaking, and I was yakking to somebody, and somebody said, "Hey Art, they just called your name to come up front." I said, "What?" They just called your name. And so I stood up and went up, and I guess I had gotten the best grades or something. And I was the trainee. I still got the paper, trainee of the cycle. Who knew? Who knew? But yeah, the pressure was thinking about going into the field and remembering what to do for certain wounds.
Was there something special you did for good luck? Like a prayer, a charm?
No. A lot of the hymns that I learned in church when I was a kid would come back to me. And like I said, when we got hit on Mother's Day, I did a lot of praying then. That was 7 hours of... But no, I can't think of a good luck charm or anything like that. You know, I didn't tie my boots a certain way. I've never been superstitious like that.
But you are religious?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And that helped you? Was that something that you always kind of had in your mind, and like maybe, is that maybe what helped you? You seem to have kept a cool head. I don't want to impose thoughts or feelings, but like what I'm getting is like you seem to be a pretty cool cat, you know, the whole time you were there.
I don't know about that. I'll tell you one thing I used to do for the guys, and they always came to me, was to write letters for them. I've always been a good writer, and especially love letters. And they would come to me and they go, Doc, you got to write another letter. Listen to this, and they say, wow. They said they would get letters back from their fiance or girlfriend or something. They said, Doc, we got to do another one. This is really going good, you know. And we'd sit down and I'd write some for them. And that was fun. That's a way to pass the time, and and you get to know guys. You get to know them inside out. You're not sitting around doing video games and stuff. You talk about home. You talk about what you want to do when you get back in the world, as they called it. And I forget what your original question. I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. You say you assume I was calm, cool, and collected, or?
Yeah. You just seem like from some of the stories you said. You seem to have processed things, pretty well with some of the detail you're giving me and things like that. And I imagine anybody under pressure in the middle of the attack, providing medical treatment, that's impressive in of itself, doing medical treatment on its own, let alone in a stressful situation like that.
Yeah. You just don't think about it at the time. The last thing you think of is, at least for me, was getting hit while I was working on somebody. My concentration was on that person. And you knew that the likelihood, especially if there was any small arms fire, they will shoot a medic in a heartbeat. That's a real morale killer. And a medic and the radio man, they were two big targets. But you just do what you got to do, and to help save a life. And that's what I was there for. So, you don't really think about it, like I said, till afterwards. Wow, I almost got hit. You don't.
Mm-hmm. So you said that, writing the letters was kind of entertaining. What else did you do for entertainment?
Play guitar. There was a guy, when I was in the medical battalion, there was a guy named Jack Mishishima from Hawaii. And he was a really good guitarist. And so I played guitar since I was 12 years old. So he would say, why don't you play these chords and do this? And he'd say, I want you to play these chords. I'm going to play the lead to light my fire. On the lead part, the doors. And so we'd go play. And he was a neat guy. Didn't play much once I got into the bunker with the artillery unit. There wasn't a whole lot of time to do that. But I guess writing letters and me writing letters for myself, that was a good pastime. I don't know. I didn't go out and play ping pong. I didn't go to any clubs and drink or anything like that. Like in villages, they had, sometimes if you were near a village, they had stuff where GIs would go, and that wasn't my deal. I'll tell you one thing, when I was in a medical battalion, this was kind of weird. They sent us somewhere. It was like a MASH unit, and we were all in this room. It was kind of dark, and there were cots and stuff all over the place. And somebody yells, hey, they're bringing the stiffs in. And I looked at somebody and said, what's a stiff? And I soon found out they were talking about dead bodies. And so they bring wounded in, and they bring bodies in. Now these wounded guys were just freshly wounded. They just threw them on a helicopter and brought them in. And so we got a ward full of people, dead bodies, you know, with feet hanging out the end of the bags. This is when the war really hit home for me. Wow, people are getting killed, my age. And all of a sudden I hear, you know, I'm talking, I'm running around, I'm treating people, and I hear somebody said, Ark, Ark. And it was one of the guys laying on a cot. And he's laying face down, and he's got 3 AK-47 holes in him. One in the back, one in each leg, coming in from behind. And it was my squad leader from boot camp. His name was Samuel Baker. And I said, oh my God. I said, Baker, I said, how'd you know I was even here? He says, I remember your voice. And he's laying there, and he says, am I going to make it, Doc? And I said, well, it's not bleeding a lot. I said, that's a good sign. And I said, they're going to have to get you to a field base camp hospital, and they'll treat you. But you hang in there. It looks like you're going to be okay. You know. And I just knelt down. I stayed with him. I put my hand on his shoulders, and I couldn't believe I would see somebody from boot camp that was in. You know, he was my squad leader. And I even got a picture of us together at boot camp. You know, there was Sam with some other guys that we used to run around with a little bit, and that was so weird. And like I said, it's like wounded bodies and dead bodies, you know, filled the place, and that's a pretty vivid memory. I think it was because it was my first introduction to we're in a killing zone. So, whatever that story's worth.
All these are vastly important. I mean, not just to, you know, to me for the purposes of
right.
this project, but also, you know, a lot of what the Veterans Voices project is doing here is people freshly coming home from current conflicts and things like that. And all these are, you know, I'm not a veteran myself, but these are very relatable for the veterans who do come home, and they see these.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like I said, I watched a interview that was from the early 90s, and then I've heard some that were in the 30s. They did audio then, and, you know, people are going to be listening to this, you know, 50 years from now and things like that. And this is incredibly important. Every story you have is very important and very topical.
I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad.
Let's see, I think we left off here. They want me to ask, were there any entertainers? I like specifically like USO or maybe even something local?
No, I never got to see Bob Hope, but our area was too hot for him to come into. But I did see Joy Bishop, and I got my picture taken with him. And Tippi Hedren, you know her at all? She was the lead actress in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, that movie. Tippi Hedren was the star of that movie.
Wow.
And she was there, and Joy Bishop was there, and they were riding around in Jeeps, and they stopped at Ly-K, and we got to go see them, and I shook his hand and had my picture taken with him, and he's got his arm around me. That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. He was part of the Rat Pack back then, and yeah, that's the only one. That's the only one.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Did you get to, and you did get to meet her as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I didn't know her as well as I, you know, as I did. I was familiar with the movie The Birds, but as an actress, you know, Joy Bishop I'd heard of quite a bit, and saw him on Ed Sullivan a lot.
What did you do when you were on leave?
Well, it wasn't even called leave. It was or leave before I went to.
Went on leave, so I guess like broken up throughout your service.
Because it didn't say R&R, it said leave, unless they meant R&R.
I believe they mean R&R.
R&R, I went to Japan twice.
Okay.
Yep. And I had to be with my buddy Howie. And he was, like I said, he was a good friend. He was wounded in Nam and evacuated to Japan. And he worked in the hospital there when I got there. The doctors just kept him to help out there. And he told me when I got there, he said, look, Randy, if you don't want to go back to Vietnam, these doctors are very anti-war, and they can fudge your records, and you won't have to go back. They can make it so you get a medical discharge. And I kept thinking, you know, I've always wanted my nose fixed. But I said, I can't do that. I can't do that. I said, there's guys back there that depend on me, and I think about my dad, you know, how that would be with me the rest of my life if I didn't go back and serve my time that I signed up to serve, and that I did something to get out of it, you know. I said, if I go back and die, I die, you know. I gotta live with myself, so I didn't do it. But other than that, I just spent time. Howie would take me places, and we'd ride around on the subways and the rails, and it was funny. We walked down the street, a sidewalk, and you're a head above everybody. You can see clear down the street because everybody's so short. You know, that was kind of cool. And we would go, he'd take me to these back alley places to eat, you know, and the food was great. It was smoky, not cigarette smoke, like grill smoke, you know, and like it was almost like grease in the air. But I remember these smoky places, but boy, the food was good. It was good. And I remember when I first got there, I went to a place called Camp Zama, and they said, what would you like to eat? And I said, I would like a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, some potato chips, and some orange juice. That's what I want. And I still remember that because that meant the world to me. That meant the world to me.
What was that you were eating back there that this was so good to compare it to?
Well,
Like
sea rations?
Yeah, like can you describe those a bit?
Yeah, there were some that I wouldn't touch. It just didn't look good, right. I love beanie weenies. I would trade anything for a can of beanie weenies and peaches. And they had a thing in Nam called tropical chocolate. It was chocolate that wouldn't melt. And the reason it wouldn't melt was because it was like 75% paraffin. It was a big chunk of, what was that used to call those big chunks of chocolate you could buy? Chunky or something. And that's, you know, you just break it off, but it had a chocolate flavor to it, so you thought you were eating candy. But that's one of those things I don't remember too well, is eating in Vietnam. You know, I don't remember, when we were out in the field, they would hand out these boxes, and you'd open up the cans with your P38, and I remember crackers and peanut butter and jelly. We'd sometimes mix the peanut butter and jelly together and make a dip, and then dip the crackers in it and eat it. That was good. I think some of them had cigarettes in them. Not sure. I mean, it was food, but it wasn't like you were in a diner or something. You know, you never got a milkshake. You never got milk. You never got real eggs. You got powdered eggs. God, there was one kid in our unit that ate hamburger raw. He'd tell them not to cook it. If you're going through, like, if we were ever in a mess tent, that was a luxury, is having a mess tent. He'd get the hamburger raw and eat it. I'd never seen anybody do that, but he did. Yeah, I don't remember the sea rations being horrible, but I remember how much I wanted a glass of cold orange juice and a BLT. That sounded good to me, and some potato chips.
That sounds good now.
Excuse me, I'm good. Time for lunch.
What were some of the pranks that you and others would pull? Or were there pranks?
There were pranks in boot camp and advanced infantry training. There was one guy he was taking a nap, and a bunch of us made him think it was morning. He had to get up, and so we were all getting dressed and pretending, "Hey, get up! We gotta get in formation." And so we did that, and oh gosh, I remember this. There was one guy in boot camp. His last name was Clapp, and he was a redhead. And he was on fire watch one night, and you have to walk around in the barracks. And this one guy would say something to him every time he passed his bunk. He would say something, and pretty soon he said something to him that just rubbed him the wrong way. And pretty soon they're both running around. And Clapp was chasing him. But I can't think of any pranks. It was just. I remember one time in boot camp there was one of the guys, like I said, I was with a lot of blacks and Puerto Ricans from New York. And this one Puerto Rican guy was really well built. I mean, he had big arms. He wasn't real tall, but man, he was muscular, chest, everything. And he was a really nice guy. I got to be friends with him. And Howie was there too, so that's when I first met Howie. And they were all, one night they were standing at the door of the barracks, and they were kind of singing something. And I went up, and I started singing. And I remember the songs, "As we stroll along together," and they're doing a backup harmony. Ooh, it was so cool. So in love, only you, no one else will ever do. So in love, ooh. And I remember that because it sounded so cool. I thought it sounded good, but
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that pulls people together. And I remember he got this. I remember the sergeants. Boy, if you made any noises in boot camp while you're in formation. Oh, this one guy, his name was Ed Barber, and he was a tall, blonde-headed kid, and he was always screwing around. And I remember one time in formation, he passed gas. It was really loud, and he turned around, he looked at the ground and says, "You hear that buck snort?" And he had to get down. "Give me 25, started. And I can't help but laugh when somebody does that. It was like when you're in school, somebody in the classroom lets one go. I lose it. They might as well put me in the hallway. I'm done. I'm going to laugh and giggle for an hour. And that's the way it was in boot camp. And I remember one time I said something in formation. They would want you to yell. They'd say, "What's the spirit of the bayonet? To kill. What's the spirit of the bayonet? To kill." And one time they said, "What's the spirit of the..." I said under my breath, I thought, "What's the spirit of St. Louis?" Like Lindbergh's plane. And I said, "To fly." I had to get 20 push-ups for that. So I don't even think anybody in the formation got it, but
It was worth it.
yeah. Yeah, there were fun times. They were more in boot camp and AIT than Vietnam, but the fun times in Vietnam was just sitting around talking about home. And I used to talk to Jesse a lot about, "Let's get a band when we get home. Let's get a band together." He says, "Yeah, I know some guys, And we'd make these big plans and talk about the cars we were going to get. And there was one guy that was there for 3 years, and he had found out that his mother had spent all the money he had been sending home. He thought he was saving money for 3 years in Vietnam. back then, I was only getting $250 a month. That's combat pay, everything. And so I'd send $200 a month home, you know, and keep 50. I have no idea what I even spent it on. Laundry, maybe. We had a Mama San, had a laundry set up as Mama San and Peanut's Laundry. And Peanut was a little Vietnamese girl, and her mom would do clean her boots and stuff. Those are good memories, though. I don't know where I put all the bad memories.
Yeah. Did you keep a personal diary?
Over there? No. Other than my letters home. I remember my dad wrote to me once. I don't know what I said. But he said, "Don't ever feel like you're alone over there, son, because a part of me is with you." And I always remembered that, you know, because a lot of times I forget that my dad was in war, you know, you almost have to be in a situation like that to understand it. And I think that's why I get along with other veterans so well, and other World War II people especially will open up to me, because not only have I been in combat, I've studied World War II history. You know, I know about the Pacific War and the European theater. You know, and when they mention an island, I go, "Oh yeah," you know, Peleliu or Tinian, and you know, and the different theaters in Europe. You know, the different places, the different battles. You know, Battle of the Bulge and all that. And I think that makes a difference to another veteran, and that's why I think Dad's remark meant so much to me. You know, that part of me is with you.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yep. Completely out as a civilian.
Yeah.
July 3rd, 1971. I had to get 3 haircuts before they let me go. 3 haircuts.
3 haircuts.
Yep, my hair was too long. It was one last harassment. I was a bad egg in Colorado, you know, after the war. I let my hair grow as long as I could without anybody seeing me, and I was stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, and I'd tell the motor pool, I had motor pool and clinic duty. I'd tell the motor pool I had clinic duty, and tell the clinic duty I had motor pool duty, and me and my buddies would go down to the Garden of the Gods and drink beer. But
is that where you were released from duty?
yes.
Is Colorado?
Yep, Fort Carson, Colorado. It was a pretty place.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward, after you were released into civilian life?
I went back to school, went back to college, and I started playing in bands. My first band was with my brother and Chuck Beck, who owns Absolute Music. He was our lead guitarist. We had a 3-piece group, then had a 4-piece, and then it was just various country bands and stuff. But went back to school. I got my degree in psychology, like I said, and that was in '74. And then in '77 I got my master's in education, and was teaching school at the time.
Was it supported by the GI Bill, your education?
Yeah, that helped immensely.
Do you attend reunions?
Nobody's had any. No.
For veterans, no?
No. We weren't like that. You know, people were coming and going all the time. And we didn't, like, I know a Marine unit. It was one of the last Marine units that actually went through boot camp and training together and went together to Vietnam. They were they were called the Brownwater Marines down in the Delta. And they all stayed together. But that wasn't the case later on. I wish it would have been. That would have been nice.
Have you attended any reunions recently, like up to this point? like Vietnam veterans reunions or anything like that?
Well, we organize what's called Remembrance Day. It's a Vietnam veterans, to remember when the day we left Vietnam in '73, which is the end of March, I think. And we started doing that, and we organize MIA POW Day. Day of Remembrance. We have Purple Heart Day. I do belong to a Purple Heart chapter. They accepted me in and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was in 2005 or 2007 that I got a call from the Dayton VA that told me not to get any MRIs because they thought there was metal in my body. They had found metal in my body. So for 3 years I couldn't get an MRI. And they said, you know how it got there? I said, yeah, pretty sure. But even that, even that wasn't enough to get me papers, for my Purple Heart. But they accepted me in. Now, I don't wear anything. I wear a Purple Heart support pin, but I can't wear anything. I just belong to the chapter, and but I do a lot for the chapter. Do a lot. Love those guys. So I go to chapter meetings. I belong to a VFW 1031, but I don't go to any meetings. They just wanted me to join. I think that's about it as far as veteran stuff.
Did your military experience, I know we sort of touched on this before, did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in a general sense? Like, personal philosophies on either?
When I first got out, I was kind of bitter towards the military. But I'm glad for the experience, real glad. The military gave me a great appreciation for life. I know how bad things can be. And I took a lot of things for granted before that I don't now. Almost every night, I thank God for having a pillow under my head, a roof over my head. Pretty safe environment, It's a little hard to sleep sometimes when you know there might be a rocket coming in, anytime, at any second. And to not have that, when I first got out, I wouldn't look up when I walked. I was afraid to trip. I was going to hit a tripwire. You're just so used to watching out. You watch for snipers, you watch for snakes, you watch for tripwires, you watch for open pits, that are covered up with punchy stakes in them. And if you're not allowed, if you don't feel like you have the freedom to talk about it, so you hold it all in. And that's what I did for years. But my thoughts about the Army, there were good times and bad times, and there were good leaders, and there were lazy leaders. So, like any organization, I suppose. But I think it would be good for any kid to go through the regimen of discipline. I think that's important just to gain some sense of responsibility and discipline. I think it would be good for any kid, and hopefully stir up a sense of patriotism. That there was a reason, especially like in World War II. I now look at Vietnam as we were helping the people not to live under the oppression of communism. And that was no way to live. you know, and we were helping them. That's the way I look at it, that we were called in to help them, free them from that, to living under that regime. But, yeah, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I didn't get killed. And that's why I want to spend my life now. I think to me, I'm honoring those who didn't make it by serving and being an honorable person. Because that's why the last memorial I put up is called the Dogtag Memorial. It has the names of all the guys from Clark County that died in Vietnam. And when I gave my talk, when we dedicated that memorial, I said, we as veterans have a responsibility to live honorable lives for these guys. So people will look at us and they'll say they died for a reason. They died for a noble cause. They died, you know, I want them to look at us not as like ne'er-do-wells, you know, with old ragged shirts and beards and this and that and the other, but as responsible citizens. Serving, keep serving, you know, be a giver, not a taker, you know. That's the way I want to be, that's the way I want to live, and I appreciate coming out of Vietnam alive. And I'm showing my appreciation by serving. That's the way I look at it.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
I'll probably think of it as soon as I walk out the door. No, we've covered a lot of stuff. I'm just glad, I appreciate the experiences I've had. You know, everything we do in our life makes us what we are at this moment. And that includes war. And it includes death. It includes dismembered bodies. You know, it's all up there. You know, it all contributes some kind of way. And it can either make you a very bitter person, hateful. I know a Vietnam guy that when somebody says welcome home or thank you for your service, his attitude is, well, it's too little too late. And I knew this guy, and he was bitter, and I said, look, these kids that come up to you weren't even born when you served. They're just trying to thank you for something you did that they don't understand or know about, but they know that they should do that. I said, you don't need to be barking at them, you know. He goes, yeah, I know. And I said, good. Let them thank you. You know, that's what they want to do. Let them thank you. And but like I said, I'm glad for that experience. I wouldn't want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it. And I like to talk to any veteran, young, that are coming back, and I've done it. And once they find out I'm from Vietnam, they thank me. They said, because of what you guys went through when you came back, we don't have to go through that. You know, they can be against the war, not the warrior, you know, like they did in Vietnam. I said, well, you don't need to thank me, we just went through it. It just happened. But thank you. And but the war and all that experience has given me a great appreciation for what I have. And I don't take anything for granted. I appreciate life and living. So that's about it, I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you for this interview and your service.
Well,
I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.